Hello my friends and welcome to FISHTORY. I am Alexander Williamson and today we're talking about this spidery, creepy, crawly wood known as spiderwood. Now in the aquarium hobby, very often we say we're going to get some driftwood for our aquarium. And we'll say, yeah, we'll just get some driftwood from a tree, or we're going to get some botanicals. And this is no different, but a lot of people think just because it's in the store, therefore it's safe. Just because other people are using it, therefore it's safe. Therefore it's sustainable, therefore it makes sense. And what I wanted to do is tell you a little bit more about this slightly deceiving plant. Because this is not a tree, and many of you may know that. This is the roots of the azalea genus of plants. And for that matter, when you get a piece of spiderwood, it could be a rhododendron, it could be an azalea, it could be a mountain azalea, it could be a North American azalea, it could be one of over 10,000 cultivars and species within the genus. And not to mention, it's not driftwood. So a lot of people think of this as driftwood and that's why it's safe, because it's been sitting at sea and then it's picked up off the coast of Indonesia in some, beautiful tropic beach, and that's why it sits so nicely in your, no. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about its properties. Does it sink right away? Why does it get that weird mold or clear slimy stuff on it? And also, for that matter, if you know anything about azaleas, you may know that azaleas are toxic to humans and pets. 100 grams of azalea fresh is enough to cause death in a full-grown male human in certain species of azalea plants. And those are the pretty plants that you think of when, walking through a beautiful garden. So where is this wood from if it's not washing up on beaches? What does it do in your aquarium if 100 grams of this stuff can actually kill someone my size? And for that matter, if we're talking about all of this, what does it do to a cat or a dog if they get a hold of it? And what are the effects to your fish, and how can you make sure that everything goes smoothly and that you don't have to worry about any of these what ifs that may be crossing your mind right now? Not to mention, let's end it on a note of some helpful tips and tricks on what to do when working with this stuff and how its life is going to play out in your aquarium. So what happens when you start with a nice, beautiful piece of this, what it's going to look like over time, how long it's going to last, how it's going to change the chemistry of your water, help or harm your fish, pros and cons. Let's go through all of that today. Hopefully we'll all learn a little something more in this, we'll call it a semi-deep dive. We'll call it a 5-foot dive. We'll call it a dive into the shallow end on spiderwood today. So if you're excited about this topic, or you've watched the channel before and you just haven't gotten around to it, I would love it if you subscribed. Right now, 50% of folks watching the content aren't subscribed, and Cthulhu commands you to subscribe. Do it. And if you're already a member, thank you so much. You guys, you members of the YouTube channel and of the Discord or Patreon, all the ways you guys help, even just watching means the world to me, so thank you. And let's jump in and talk about where in the heck this stuff is from, who's creating it, who's selling it, who's profiting from it, what's in it, and is it sustainable? Is it a good thing for the environment? Is it a good thing for our hobby? Alright my friends, let's get the scariest part out of the way first, which is the toxicity of azalea and rhododendron wood or shrubs, bushes, and plants. Now, I think you've noticed that fish are not dying in droves, and people haven't reported that they put this spiderwood in their aquarium and all of a sudden all their fish turn belly up. And of course that is not happening. Now there's a couple reasons for that, but we will uncover a couple more fascinating things about this particular wood, this particular material, by telling the story of a recent study that was conducted on the toxicity of the azalea plants. So for years and years, the azalea plants and rhododendron plants were raised in Europe predominantly. During the 20th century, they were raised massively across the UK and the Netherlands, as well as the US. And they were cut and used for nursery starts and things like this, sold for landscaping. And they were sold at fairly small sizes, or around maybe 2 or 3 feet tall was as big as they would get, even though these things can get huge. They can get up to 50 feet tall and 100 or 200 feet across in some cases. They can be huge shrubs, but they all produce a toxin called grayanotoxin. And grayanotoxin is produced in rhododendrons, azaleas, and every single species within the genus. And it's a pretty toxic stuff, as I mentioned. However, not that often do people eat 100 grams of it. It's a bowl full of almonds or something along those lines, but it's a lot of the wood to be eating. And the wood in particular has far, far less of those toxins than the bark, than the twigs on a live cutting of the plant, and from the leaves, stems, flowers, and all the other byproducts of these plants. And there was a study done in 2002 that was really comprehensive, because they have for years sold the azaleas and rhododendrons out of the UK, the 1960s and 70s, and they would cut them and they'd sell them over in the Netherlands on the flower exchange, which is the biggest botanical and floral exchange market in the world. And they would sell these things, and it was a major product of Wales and other parts of Europe that kind of specialized in it. The Netherlands as well as Denmark had some areas where they really grew a lot of different types, like thousands of types of these azaleas and rhododendrons. And so they did a study on them when they started looking for new uses for the byproducts. And as I said, they grow the shrubs to 2 or 3 feet tall. And generally this will leave you with an 18-inch to 24-inch root, something like, 0.75 meters across max. And this allows you to then cut it up and find it in the sizes that we see in the aquarium hobby quite readily. And that's not an accident. It's because they grow these plants big enough to cut daughter starts from the mother plants, and then they do that and they take any leftover pieces, or if the original plant is done, they will chop it up and burn it, and they will usually turn the leftovers into charcoal historically. And it is a very, very hot burning charcoal because of the lightness and the porosity of the wood. But people worried that burning it was going to be toxic to the workers, and or that shaving it or woodworking with it could be dangerous. So they really studied it and found that the toxin, one, breaks down at 300 degrees Celsius. So boiling it won't get rid of it. But luckily, it is hardly in the wood at all once the wood has cured and been dead for several months. It naturally breaks down at a fairly quick rate, and then beyond that, there is some left in the wood, enough so that, if a cat or a dog ate several grams of it, it may get an upset stomach. So it is a good idea to keep this out of reach of pets if you've got a pet that would be gnawing on it and eating it. But overall, it's not something that you're going to have to worry about, and it's not something that your fish are going to have to worry about because of the way grayanotoxins work. They are a pesticide, and so they are not necessarily aimed at the biology of a fish. So while a lot of it would kill a fish still, a little bit that seeps out of the wood will not. And a lot of times the wood has been steamed to take the bark off of it. Because remember, this is not driftwood. This is hardy wood from a big shrub, and they have to clean all the dirt off of it. They'll usually shake it and kind of jostle it back and forth with the machine, and then they will either use a sandblaster or walnut shell casings and blast that at it with high pressure machines and clean it up so it looks nice and shiny and looks somewhat sanded. Now in other countries they do this by hand, and they wear gloves that have basically a sandpaper-like texture. And in other countries since the 20th century, they've come up massively in coming production-wise up and ahead of the UK and the US and the Netherlands. China and India in particular have been growing massive amounts of azaleas and rhododendrons and coming up with new kinds all the time. They're kind of a global plant, and it's kind of fascinating how they have been found all over the place. And this wood is obviously a byproduct of another industry, of the plant industry, of the landscaping industry. And so it's actually a very sustainable thing to be using the roots. And instead of burning them like charcoal, which was done for so long in history for running smelters or running different machines that would need hot, intense fuel and energy, now selling it as a decorative botanical is something that's actually pretty sustainable. You can grow it on these massive farms. It's a beautiful plant. Now, one last note about the toxins in the plant is that this is where the compound mad honey comes from, if you've ever heard of that, which is a honey that can cause you to be dizzy and laugh uncontrollably, and basically you lose your mind a little bit if you have a lot of this stuff, and it's a strong version. And it's grown in Nepal and Tibet, predominantly parts of India as well, on these cliffs by a particular bee that really likes to use the azalea, because that granotoxin chemical is a pesticide, so it keeps other bugs away from the baby bee larva that's growing, and these bees have evolved to not be bugged by it. Pardon the pun. Alright guys, so let's finish off this video with a few notes on the pros and cons of this stuff and how the life cycle of it will play out in your aquarium. As you put it in the first few months, it'll go from the way it looks to getting a layer of, as we talked about, that slimy clear film, which is just the lignin, the tannins, and the cellulose coming out of the plant slowly. Even those granotoxins, slight amounts, are coming out, and then they're getting eaten by bacteria, by fungi, archaea, and microorganisms in the aquarium. And snails and shrimp really tend to like this. Also, so do some of your live bearer fish, and some of your labyrinth fish really seem to enjoy this. And I've even seen a few cichlids like cribs munching on it. And over time, it also breaks down rather quickly compared to other woods. It's not considered a hardwood by any means, and so it definitely gets soft. And if you have snails and you have the water there with a mild acidity, over time it is going to break down. And within somewhere between a year to 4 years, you'll probably be left with really mushy kind of sticks that are kind of just held together by the algae or the moss that grew on them, rather than the structural integrity that they have within them. So we're going to go over the pros and cons before we get out of here. And some of the pros and cons, they kind of overlap. And what do I mean by that? Well, you know, some things that are a pro to one person might be a con to another. So for instance, it doesn't change the chemistry of your water in your aquarium that much. It's not going to drop the pH a whole lot like some woods do, like Mopani might. Mopani driftwood definitely will sink your pH from like a 7 to a 6 a lot of times, and it will make the water like a red or brown color. This isn't going to really stain the water at all. It's not going to release a lot of tannins, or, you know, good or bad tannins. It just doesn't have a whole lot of tannins. It's kind of devoid of that. So that's a plus or a minus, I suppose. It's lightweight, and it comes in sizes that are small, so that's a plus and a minus as well. If you have a giant monster fish aquarium, you may want one big piece of wood for catfish and things to hide under, and you're not going to find that in this stuff. It is very small, usually not more than 18 to 24 inches in total, and it's pretty scraggly like a vine, as you've noticed. So it's great for breaking apart, and it's small enough that you can boil it in your own house, or you can soak it in a bathtub or a bucket if you want to make it so that it sinks in your aquarium right away, because oftentimes you have to wait months and either weight it down or tie it down with wood to get it to fully sink in your aquarium. Well, this stuff will do it a lot quicker, and if you boil it, it will do it even faster than that. So the fact that it's small and can be broken apart and fit in like a crab pot or a big pasta pot, that is a pretty handy feature for a lot of people. Now also, this is going to release tannins. This is going to reduce the amount of that white slimy cellulose and other compounds that get released and over time kind of create biofilm. And whether that's a plus or a minus to you depends. If you have a bunch of shrimp, you might love that. If you have a bunch of angelfish, that might be just kind of ugly and distracting and require more water changes to get rid of. So that's kind of on both sides also. Now, the other thing about the fact that it's easy to break down and comes in small sizes that's nice is you can make dioramas. You can make whole bonsai trees and complicated, complex shapes by gluing the twigs together and selecting just random pieces of any shape or size, which can save you a lot of money. Whereas with like Mopani or Manzanita, you might have to find the perfect piece. And if it's 5-6 feet tall, you're going to be paying a whole lot of money. If it's anything for the aquarium hobby or for decorating or landscaping, that's going to be an expensive piece of wood. Now, it's also very common, which to some people is a bummer. They want something exotic. But to others, it's nice because it is easy on the eye and it fits in nano tanks. It looks familiar. It looks like it fits. And you can emulate a lot of stuff that's already been done online if you like the way that looks. Now, I would recommend this for 75-gallon tanks or smaller, just because unless you're doing a diorama aquascape, like I said, it just doesn't have that much size or heft to it. Now, it also is a pro and a negative that it grows biofilm. Like I said, if you boil it first, it will do less of that. If you soak it, it will do less of that. And if you leave it in the sun to have UV light cure it, it will do less of that. But if you are raising a bunch of shrimp and you have a community tank, you may want that and you may like that. And the fact that it does that is a good thing. If not, you may not want it in your community tank or as a featured aspect of your tank. It's also not a good pleco food, and it doesn't have a whole bunch of nutrients or anything in it. So if you were hoping for wood-loving catfish and other, autocinclists to come and munch on it, yeah, they'll eat the biofilm off of it, but there's nothing too nutritional there for them. You'll need to supplement their diet. And as I said before, it will grow algae and diatomaceous algae, fungi, cyanobacteria, that kind of stuff pretty easily. So it sometimes needs to be cleaned or taken out and adjusted. And for some people, that's a negative as well. Now, one massive plus in my mind is that it's coming from renewable sources. And that, the people who are creating it, you can get it from in country. I can get US sourced stuff, and I can get stuff that's sourced in India, for instance. And I know that those are going to be better than Indonesia or China, for instance, where they may have less control over the wages and the care given to the employees and the people working in these businesses. So, at the end of the day, it's up to you to decide how much you want to be involved in understanding, is this wood I'm getting coming from a sustainable nursery and it's just, an aftermarket supply that really they're just selling off excess root stock and it would have been burned into charcoal or something else anyways? Or, is this something that is scraps that people are making a whole living off of and depending on and not getting paid hardly anything, and they're basically using that as a way to survive, as happens in China, Indonesia, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, places like that sometimes. So it's up to you, as always with these sort of things. How much time do you want to invest in looking into where you get your stuff, and how transparent are the companies that you get your stuff from, and do you care or not, and what does that do to the price? All of that is going to be up to you at the end of the day. But with this product, it's something that can be be managed and that can be a very positive and sustainable thing compared to, you know, seeking rare woods or endangered species or things like that that sometimes happen in the trade. So lastly, the theoretical toxicity of it. Once it's been in the water for a while, or once you boil it or soak it, or if it's been sitting outside in the sun for a while, soak, salt, or sun, all take care of breaking that down over time, and you probably won't have any major problems, but just keep it out of reach of any pets that are real mouthy and chewy, and you should be just fine. As always, you guys, thanks for watching. I hope you learned a thing or two. Maybe you learned way too much about spiderwood, but I hope you like the nerdiness of the channel. And don't forget to hit that thumbs up on the way out, and I will see you next episode. Bye-bye.